Welcome back to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans, new and old, to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 4,
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
and I'm your host, Mia Sabanko.
Now let's get into this week's episode. This week, we're discussing season 4, episode 17, Saving Private Leo. It originally aired on March 28th, 2002, and had 3.87 million viewers.
We start out this one in the kitchen when it's morning time. Phoebe is at the table. She's working on her computer. Then Paige walks in and Piper offers her wheat germ pancakes, but she grabs a bagel instead. And then Cole is looking around for his deposition, but the kitchen's a little messy. And he reminds Phoebe that his firm is having a party tonight. And Phoebe says, if I could finish my work in here, that would be great. And then Piper offers Cole pancakes and then Phoebe, but Phoebe just wants it to be quiet so she can finish her column. Then Leo orbs in and Piper offers him pancakes, but he's just getting his toolbox and says he doesn't have time. Piper's like, all right, you know what? I'm not cooking for you people anymore. From now on, you're all on your own. Then Cole makes an outlet surge with his power, and Piper yells, and Phoebe's like, can everyone please be quiet? And then she notices that her battery died, and Cole makes the smoke alarm go off, and Leo floats up to take care of that. And then Cole leans into Phoebe and says, you know, you'd get all the quiet you want if we had our own place. And they kiss, and then he leaves, saying that he's interviewing personal assistants today. So Phoebe leaves to go find somewhere quiet, and Piper goes over to Leo and says that he looks tired. And Leo says, I've been working double shifts. The elders have been piling it on me ever since you guys took out the source. Then Paige asks about the toolbox, and Piper says that he poses as a heavenly handyman and says it's actually how we met. And then he says that they want him to check out a potential white lighter, says that she's a school teacher about to fall off the path and she needs some inspiration. Piper says, speaking of inspiration, it's the 60th anniversary of the Battle of Guadalcanal, and they're having a reunion for local veterans, so I RSVP'd for it. And he says, Piper, I can't be seen there. She says, no, it's okay. I told them that you were your grandson. He says, well, that's not it. I don't want to go. And you would have known that if you would have asked me or talked to me about it instead of just making decisions for me. And then he orbs out, and Piper is very confused because that is not very Leo of him at
I was
all.
gonna say, I can't recall the last time I saw Leo this moody.
I know, the attitude came out of nowhere. I'd be just as confused.
But I love how Piper's like, oh, like, it's fine. Like, you're just your identical grandson. No worries.
Yeah, just the exact fitting image.
But then again, Piper is the spitting image of her great grandmother because they have the same soul. So I
This
guess
is
whatever.
true. They recognize souls. I feel like, okay, I like that they are kind of having everybody together, showing that sort of chaos and like there's so many people and blah, blah, blah. It makes sense to me, but like that house is so big. And like Phoebe, you have a bedroom. Like
I was
there's
gonna
so
say,
many places she
it
could be
makes
instead.
no sense first thing in the morning to be working in the kitchen where everyone's obviously going to be like getting their coffee, getting their breakfast, all that stuff. Like, why wouldn't you be, say, like in the parlor, in the conservatory, or in your room? Like, there are a million places you can fucking go. You live in a mansion.
Literally, their house is ginormous. And she's acting like nobody has the right to be in the kitchen besides her right now.
She could even be in the attic. She'd be so far from everyone up there.
Yeah, she's got plenty of space to work on things.
Though it is the early 2000s, maybe like they did not have good enough like Wi-Fi or whatever to extend up like anywhere but this specific area of the house.
I guess we'll just have to put it at that because who knows?
But yeah, so Phoebe, I mean, it's all plot's sake, right? So that we could get to what Cole's trying to do here, which is get them to move out.
Exactly. Which I wonder what his game plan is with that. I mean, he wants them to live alone. My guess would be he wants them to kind of be apart from her sisters so he could have it his way, and They can be evil together.
I'm thinking that a little bit too. I'm also just thinking it's easier to do all the things he's doing without everyone there. Because I mean, what was it last episode that Paige walked in on him doing evil magic and like people are always
Yeah,
orbing in and out if they're in their own space. He can, just bring the seer over anytime he wants.
I guess. Whenever Phoebe's not around or at work, now that she's got a job, it would be so much easier for him to get these things done without a house full of people. Very, very true.
Yeah, he can also flame in and out without worrying about being spotted. It's a lot of like little things, I think, adding up to this. And also just the fact that I think, and we could talk more about this as the next couple of episodes go on, but I think now that like the source is maybe gaining a little bit more power inside of Cole, he no longer feels connected to anyone in the family but Phoebe. That's what I'm starting to
Right.
think too. So like he doesn't want to
Yeah.
be around them.
Oh no, I 100% agree. We kind of can slowly see him like losing interest in everyone else, just caring about Phoebe. However, it is like, I mean, for me, if I was Phoebe, I'd be like, well, this is weird because I mean, obviously, as far as she knows, he's got no power, and he's the one that's so adamant about her being safe and like being with the power of three who can protect each other at all costs. That was always his big thing. But like now, all of a sudden, he wants to live without them. I don't know. I'd be a little bit like, where is this coming from? You know?
That is such a good point that I wasn't even thinking about because I forgot that, like, before he got powers back, that was his biggest concern that Phoebe was, like, always safe and with her sisters.
Exactly. But you know, Source don't have to worry about that anymore.
True. And then I guess the last thing I want to talk about in this scene, I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about, but the fact that Leo is actually interacting with another charge and not just with the sisters. Crazy. I forgot you have other charges, Leo.
Seriously, I think we all have. Very impressed that this is finally happening. And obviously, we could tell by the attitude here in this first scene, plus the title of the episode, that this is going to have something to do with Leo. And I'm very excited to have, hopefully, what I think is going to be like a Leo centered episode. You know?
Yeah, I think so too. Like we've got bits and pieces of Leo's past throughout the show, especially in like a little bit in season 1 and a little more in season 2. So I'm glad that we're gonna get to see Leo's backstory in this episode. I'm very excited for it.
Oh, me too, for sure.
So then we go to the veteran office, and there's this woman going through papers, and we see two ghosts, like they're kind of translucent, of soldiers standing behind her. And the first one says, I bet she scares easy. Can I scare her? And the other one says, no. He's like, come on, Rick, just let me moan once. Could be the wind, could be a ghost. And Rick's like, just watch her. He says, we've been watching this place for about 60 years, man. We're never going to find what we're looking for. I swear. Sometimes I don't know why I stay here with you. He says, because I stayed with you, bro. I promised to protect you when we enlisted, and I failed. I'm not going to fail again. Then the woman says, well, this is something. And they look over her shoulder, and Rick says, Leo Wyatt's grandson is going to attend the reunion with his wife. I told you one of them would show up eventually. And the first guy scares the woman so that they can see the address on the envelope. And he wants to go, and Rick says, not yet. You've had your fun. Now let me show you how it's done. And he starts typing, I am coming for you over and over again on the keyboard and making things fall all over the room. And obviously, like, as he keeps knocking more and more things over, she gets terrified and, like, gets up to go towards the door. And he appears in the door and says, boo. And she runs out screaming. And he goes to chase her, like, he's gonna, like, keep attacking her. But the first guy stops him and says, Rick, wait. We're after Wyatt. We're not after her.
I'm loving this scene. Clearly, these two soldiers, I mean, we get the idea they must have fought against or fought with Leo, and we don't exactly know what this grudge is that they're holding, but it sounds like that's what's keeping them around for that long. They must really hate Leo.
Yeah, so they have some really insane 60-year-long beef with Leo. We have no idea what it is yet. But I'm also going to say that some things we get here that I think are key. Rick obviously has some very serious anger management issues.
Hmm.
Like it seems like in the beginning he was very held together, but once he started doing something bad, he like lost control of himself completely. It seems like the other one who doesn't have a name yet, he's a little more like I want to go now, but also like not maybe as evil like it's looking like.
Yeah, it sounds to me like he's a little less like he's still got the same goal in mind, but he's not as like adamant and not as angry about it. But it I'm getting the feeling from Rick that his anger has more to do with guilt that he's feeling. Because he said, "Oh, I couldn't protect you then." And so maybe that's a part of why he's like putting even more bad energy or like, negative energy towards Leo. But the other guy, I guess, doesn't feel as guilty, and we don't really know what happened yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also will say, like, it is such plot sake that the woman opens like the envelope from Piper and is like, "Ooh, this is interesting. Like, why would that be interesting to you?
Yeah, I
Do you
know.
know
What
Leo Wyatt? Like, what the fuck?"
That's what I was thinking. Like, what I mean, I don't know why that's so interesting to her. I feel like every veteran from that time is probably, maybe bringing their family or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just because like he's one of the deceased ones who has family members coming to it, but like still, it was just like, what?
Yeah, definitely just a way to get their attention over. So then we have the theme, and after that, we move to the conservatory at the manor. And Phoebe's sitting at the table working. Then Paige walks in and asks if she's seen her keys. Then Piper walks in and sits across from Phoebe and says, "Leo's not answering my call." And Paige says, "Is it an emergency?" And she says, "No, but I just want to talk to him so I can figure out why he's so mad at me. I mean, I can't believe it's just because he doesn't want to go to the reunion." And she says, maybe it's because, I don't know, he died at Guadalcanal. And Piper says, "Yeah, but he died a hero. Though come to think of it, he doesn't really talk about it very much." Then she looks at Phoebe, who is just looking at her computer and typing, then makes a noise. And she's like, "Phoebe, come on, what do you think?" And she says, "I think that I came in here to get away from all the chatter, okay? I have a deadline." And she closes her computer and grabs her bag to leave. Then Paige finds her keys and is in the entryway, and she notices one of the ghosts on the stairs and says, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Wait, what? You can see me?" And she's like, "More like through you." Then Piper gets up and walks over to her, telling her to stand back. And Phoebe is sitting at the dining table when Piper calls for her. And she goes, and the ghost goes through the wall. Then they tell Phoebe. And Paige talks about how it's her first ghost that she isn't related to that she's seen. And Piper thinks that he's probably not friendly. And Phoebe says, "This is great. This is exactly what I need today. What do we do?" And Piper says, "You go back to your deadline. I'll go get the book and brush up on my ghost busting." Then Paige says that she'll do it and miss work. Says, who knows where he came from and from what era? He's like a piece of manhunk history. Then she heads upstairs and Piper looks at the mantle and picks up an army picture of Leo. I love
Okay.
how like excited Paige is about this. Like such entertainment for her.
I know, like Paige is having the time of her life. In terms of like Phoebe and Piper, I think they are both so fucking relatable in this scene. Like Phoebe just wanting to do her work and trying to like ignore everything going on around her. That's like so me when I used to live at home and I'd be like doing work and someone would just come and talk to me and I just would try not to pay attention to them. And
Right.
also where Piper's like, "Why is Leo not answering me?" And Paige is like, "Well, is it emergent?" She's like, "No, but I want to talk to him." Like
Yeah,
that's me as fuck too.
totally me. Like, great, he hates me.
That's also me when you don't answer my text, if I'm being honest.
Don't take it personally. It's so bad. I do it to everybody. Not even on purpose. I just forget and then I don't go back on my freaking thing. But I get it. I know.
But as far
Um,
as like the actual events of the scene, I mean, obviously we're setting up here more of Phoebe's annoyance and how like important her new job obviously is to her. We're setting up the idea of like Piper not really understanding why Leo doesn't want to be a part of his past, Which I think we've seen a little bit before, even like when she was learning more about his past in the episode where like Dan gave her the file and he didn't really want to talk about it that much because he like is more focused on this present life. Though I think in this episode we'll find out it's more for a different reason.
I think it's totally like it does add up because it's not like we ever see Leo really talking about his past. And, like you said, it tracks from back in season what, two?
Too. Hmm.
That, he gets upset when it comes to things like that. And now here we are with him getting angry again about the past and him trying to avoid it at all costs. So it does fit with Leo, and I can't wait to see like what this time it's gonna be for?
Yeah, definitely. And then, like we were saying earlier about Paige, she's obviously very excited to be dealing with this ghost and figure out what's going on. And I like that Piper's kind of like giving the warning of, like, well, he's probably not friendly. Like, we don't know who he is. So let's go into this cautiously.
Right. Definitely. Another thing I was thinking, why did they stay there if they're like so focused on Leo, but they can move around wherever they want? Like, why didn't they like follow up with his family, especially if they can get themselves to be like able to move stuff or, interact with the physical realm?
I'm thinking that maybe like early on, they didn't know how to leave because, like, spoiler to later in the episode, but we find out they're buried in the cemetery at that VA. So maybe at first they didn't know how to leave there. And then by time like they were interested in looking for things, they didn't know Leo's address or anything, which also doesn't make sense because I'm pretty sure Leo's wife like stayed in the same place after he died, so like they would have known where he lived, but whatever.
Yeah, like you would think they would have followed up with the wife and also maybe noticed that Leo never had any kids.
That's the other thing I was thinking because I was like, Leo and his wife didn't have kids. And if they were all friends before like they went to the war, they would know that Leo never had kids and not expect that one day one of his relatives would show up here.
Right. But however, if they happen to like die before him in the war, then they wouldn't know that he didn't make it out, right?
That is a good point. Yes. So if they were already dead, maybe they thought he survived and went home. He like they didn't know he died. I get what you're saying.
I mean, there's definitely still a lot of plot sakey things here, but I guess we're just trying to make sense of it as best we can.
No, I think what you just said is a really valid point because if they were dead first, they would not know that Leo died. So it makes sense that they might think that he lived after the war and went on to have a family. So, yes, works for me.
Exactly. Okay, good. All right.
So then we're back at the veteran office and we see the same picture that Piper was holding of Leo is hanging on the wall of honor. And Rick is staring at it when the other guy walks up to him and says, Wyatt's grandson is definitely living the good life. And Rick says, Not for long. He says, Not so fast, Rick. His wife was there, and she could see me. He's like, A witch? He says, Plus two sisters, for a grand total of three witches. Listen, Rick, I was thinking maybe we should just forget about this. And Rick says, Forget about what? What Wyatt did to us? The fact that he trapped us in this hell on earth? You want to forget him? No way. The grandson's going to pay for what the grandfather did to us. And he grabs the picture off the wall and throws it on the floor so it breaks. And the other one says, Someday you're going to have to show me how you did that. Then this security guard walks over and sees the broken picture and like looks around to see how it happened. And Rick says, No time like the present. Some say that hatred can harden the heart. I've found it can also harden the body. And he becomes corporeal and scares the guard and then picks up a bayonet off of one of the like soldier mannequins and stabs him and kills him and says, Now it's your turn, Nathan. Focus on everything that Wyatt stole from us: a life, a family, a future. Feel the hatred, bring it to the surface. And Nathan becomes corporeal too. And he hands him the bayonet and says that he'll need to practice to face the wishes.
All right. So we see these guys are still fueled by their hatred, and I guess that's what makes him corporeal. I guess that makes sense. Aside from that, I feel like this is very much just more so showing the anger and the hatred they have, trying to still hint at us like, hey, Leo did something to us, but we're not going to tell you what it is yet, and
Yeah.
that they're going after them.
Yeah, and I'm getting the sense that, like, whatever it is that happened, they obviously blame Leo for their deaths because they're saying, he stole our lives, a future, whatever. We're also
Yeah.
seeing that Rick is very clearly, like, very evil. Like, he just murdered this security guard for no fucking reason.
Yeah, I know there's no rhyme or reason for that. This poor guy was just trying to guard the place.
Yeah. And he also clearly has no fear of witches, which this is one of those things that I feel like we've questioned with ghosts before. Like, when you become a ghost, you just instantly know about witches because, like, how would they know?
I don't know. I was thinking the same thing. Unless they maybe have crossed paths with them or seen it, like how they just knew that they were witches and that witches are the only ones that can see them. But then again, I feel like we've also had maybe it's just practitioners that like also haven't been able to see ghosts.
Yeah, I think all, like, witches with active powers can see ghosts.
So then we move to Cole's office, and he's interviewing this blonde woman. Her name's Julie, about her paralegal experience and then about her demonic experiences, Powers' last kill. And she says that it was 2 years ago and says, killing's messy. My services are usually a little more discreet. And he says that he'll give her a try. And he says, I'm trying to separate my wife from the harmful influence of her sisters. It's very important for me to keep Phoebe away from them. She might be pregnant with my son. And she says, you almost say that like you love her. And he looks at the picture of them on his desk and says, a part of me does, unfortunately. Anyway, my plan is more insidious than overt. I set off the fire alarm this morning. I'll cut the power this afternoon, whatever it takes to make her home feel cramped and unlivable. She says, and seduce her with the promise of a better life. And he says, exactly. But it takes caution, focus. I need someone to cover me at work. Watch my back. And she says, well, I'll watch whatever part you want. Which, of course, they bring this. They are sexualizing another character, whatever.
Literally, anytime like a demonic woman works under a demonic man, she just has to try to fuck him. It's just like
Yeah.
show law.
Uh, I'll protect whatever part you want. Okay. Pipe down, you.
Yeah. And it would be one of those things where, like, if Cole was single and she was like making these moves to try to, like, become his queen and like gain power, I wouldn't hate her for it, right? I'd be like, okay, like, fine, go for it. Like, get in there, be powerful, bitch. But here it's like she's just like knows he's married and like wants to be his side piece. Like, I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I don't know what her goal is. I mean, we do know that as demons, they portray them as like very just sexual and no, obviously no conscious having people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It still just seems a little out of pocket. Like if you're looking to work for this guy and I don't know, like this guy could kill you. Like you're over here making moves on him when he's talking about how much he wants to be with his wife. Like,
Yeah, they're also making it seem like in the workplace, it's like women who like come on to their bosses when, like, 90% of the time it happens the other way around and is very creepy.
yeah, I'm not a huge fan that like it would be fine if like sometimes they did that because like I get it that happens and it would make sense with the show, I guess, but they do it every time they involve a woman and it just annoys me at a certain point.
It's literally been every woman but the seer. And I was like, yes, finally, like a relationship with a man and a woman that doesn't have like this enormous sexual tension. And it's just like, she wants power, right? I love it. And then
Yeah,
we go right from that to this. And I'm like, of course.
they couldn't lead us on for too long,
Because now we have a young woman, so she has to be trying to fuck.
naturally.
But other than that, I mean, I'm interested in her character overall, though. Like this demon who's not really into killing unless she has to. The way she's willing to take parts in this plan and seems to immediately understand Cole's mindset of like how he wants to play Phoebe in this way.
Right, definitely. Seems like a decent assistant to have at his side.
Yeah, definitely. But otherwise, I mean, we're mostly just getting more of Cole's plan here. That reminder that last episode, him and the seer had done that magic to get Phoebe pregnant, and they don't know if it worked yet. So just our reminder of that.
Right, absolutely.
Also, the way he specifically says that a part of him loves her. So again, that separation between the source and Cole, and like how much more is the source taking over Cole, I guess is a question to keep in the back of our minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we go to Leo's Charge's apartment, and he's under the sink fixing something. And she's talking to him about a student who brought a knife to class and is threatening her because she suspended him. She says, I've always wanted to be a teacher, but not at the cost of my life. That's why I decided to quit. And he says, that's too bad. All the good you're going to do in the world gone forever. And she says, going to do? And he says, I mean, can do. And he's making a huge mess under the sink, like not doing a good job at all. And then he just uses his powers to heal the pipes. And she talks about not having the courage to stay. And Leo says, well, the only courage that matters is what gets you from one moment to the next. Maybe you should just focus on that. And she says, do you bill as a plumber or a therapist? And he says, well, whatever it takes to stop the leak, which, by the way, is healed, sealed. And she's like, what do I owe you? And he's like, this one's on the house. And she smiles.
Like, I'm sorry, but if I was this bitch, I'd be like, wait, are you hitting on me right now? Do you want to stay for dinner? Like, is it just me? Because I totally would have been like, is there like, do we have something going on right now? Are we?
It felt very like, yeah, is Leo maybe hitting on her? Though I'm assuming like maybe because Leo's married, maybe she's seen like his wedding ring, so then like isn't thinking that way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm sure. It's just like, obviously, we know that Leo's doing this as because he's her charge or she's his charge, but like, the woman doesn't know that. So if I were her in my head, I'd be like, he so wants me.
Also, yes, I agree with you. But also like Leo, maybe you should charge because you could contribute to your household then.
Yeah, what? He's got no money. I feel like that's a little unfair to Piper, don't you think?
But
But
aside
whatever.
from that, I think it's kind of like ridiculous that like she has a very valid reason here for like not wanting to do this job anymore because a student threatened to stab her basically. So it's like, well, you should have the courage to keep this job anyway. It really like brings me to the idea of like a lot of what's going on in the country now where people act like if you're signing up to be a teacher, you should be willing to die to protect your students in a school shooting. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's giving the same kind of vibe.
Yeah, which, there are some people who are able to, and it is a very courageous thing. Like, those are very courageous acts, and even what Leo would suggest, like, that would be but it's also a little prideful and a little bit unnecessary. This, I mean, I'm not talking about, that
Yeah.
completely different conversation, but like to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stay anyways. Like, I'm sorry, but if someone was like I could teach anywhere, like I'll find a
Yeah.
new job. That's fine. Like
Yeah. No, like,
it's
if one
not
of my
worth my
students
life.
threatened to stab me, I would quit my job. Like,
Yeah, I'd be like, I think this might not be for me. I think I'm gonna pass on this one. But I mean, I understand what he means is like, too bad all the good you could do as a teacher, but I don't know, why don't you just she didn't say that she'd give up teaching forever. At least that wasn't what I heard. But I guess it did come across that way because she was scared to kind of put herself back in that position, I guess.
yeah. But I
So who
also,
knows?
like, I don't know. I don't get why the show had to come up with, like, this reason for her to be, like, falling off the path because, like, it's a very valid reason to, like, not want to be killed.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, and we'll see later on how they kind of like put that into play. But I think that if they had thought it out a little bit, they could have came up with a better plot for this woman,
Yeah, definitely. Also, I'd just like to say that like Leo is doing a very bad job at hiding his identity here too. Like he's like, I healed the pipes." Like,
Yeah, I know. And the sort of what you're going to do and this and that. Like, come on, you're better than that, Leo. This ain't your first rodeo. You should know how to speak to avoid these things. And
though
I
I
thought
mean,
he
if we
actually was like a handyman. Like, doesn't he fix things around the house all the time?
He used
Regular.
to for the sisters, but now I'm starting to wonder because like they would be gone a lot. Like, was he using magic to fix things at the manor too, and we just never saw it because the sisters didn't see it?
Probably that would make sense.
Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from this.
Me too. I mean, it's not like this was ever his career. Like he was a doctor.
Yeah.
So then we go back to the conservatory, and Piper and Paige are at the table with the book. And in the background, we see Phoebe sitting at the dining room table. And Paige says, "Did you know there's a potion in here to vanquish ghosts?" And she says, "Yeah, you pour it over their bones. We used it a couple of years ago." Then Piper's in Leo's old army file and finds his Medal of Honor just stuffed inside of it. And Paige says, "Maybe he's just being humble." She says, "No, it's not that. It's something else. I know it. I know him." And says, "There's also a spell to vanquish ghosts. It should be in the book somewhere." And then Paige finds it and says, "Oh, yeah, it's in there all right. The only catch is that you've got to be a ghost yourself to say it," which is fairly lame. Then the power goes out, and Paige says, "Not again." And Phoebe starts freaking out that she didn't save her file and lost half of her document. But she walks off saying she needs her own place. And Piper questions it, and Phoebe's like, "Nothing." Then she calls Cole from the kitchen, and Julie answers and says that she's Mr. Turner's new assistant. And she says, "I'm Phoebe, Mr. Turner's new wife." And Julie's like, "Oh, really? I didn't realize he was married." And she says, "Yeah, he is. And I really need to talk to him. It's very important." Then she asks to take a message, and Phoebe says no, and that she really needs to talk to him. I'm loving this, like, whole Phoebe getting, like, a little jealous here.
Also, Julie, come on. I didn't know he was married.
Like, you freaking homewrecker, you did
That was
know.
the
And
first thing he fucking said to you. Like, why you trying to make things sketch? Why you trying to break up our ship right now, Julie?
yeah, not fair. Not worth it.
They have enough going against them, considering he's fucking evil again. But
Yeah, I
now we
know. It's
have
not
you
like they're really
too.
winning. I know. Like, please, one more thing, and they're really gonna be done.
I swear, if they break up because he cheats on Phoebe with Julie, I'm done. I'm out. We're this
Yeah.
podcast ends.
Yeah, this podcast is over. But yeah, no, I don't know why I said loving because I'm hating it, but like I love it because it's entertaining.
Yeah.
But like Julie, pipe down over there. You're not gonna get him. We've seen people try to break Cole and Phoebe up. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. Though I will say, like, I like how Phoebe's kind of like, no, like, I need to talk to him. Like,
Yeah, I know. If someone was like, he's a little busy. Can you take a message about my husband? I'd be like, okay, I'm on my way. Like, who are you to tell me that? Unless he was like in a meeting, but she wasn't
yeah,
even like, but she was very condescending about it. Like, oh, no, you can't talk to him. Like, that's like, screw you, bitch.
no, literally. And then to kind of go back to the Piper and Paige stuff. So obviously, like we see more of Paige like being excited, some little reminders of previous things we've seen with ghosts, that there's the potion you can pour over their bones, and also that there's the one spell that Prue did in season one with Jackson Ward that you can only say if you're also a ghost.
Hmm.
And we also, of course, are getting more and more of the idea that Leo hides his past, which again, we knew from season two.
Right, exactly.
So then we go to the basement, and Piper walks down, and we see Cole hiding in the staircase. And he hears Phoebe talking to what sounds like him on the phone in the kitchen. And Phoebe says, "What, did you hire your new assistant on the spot? Well, you could have at least told her that you were married. Look, I hate to bother you, but I was kind of hoping you could help me." And Piper turns the power back on, and we see Cole flame out. Then we see Cole flame into his office behind Julie, who's on the phone with Phoebe. And she says, "I can't get any work done here, and I am so pushing my deadline. And Julie, in Cole's voice, says, what can I do? She says, I can't go to the office, right? Because they're painting it. So I was wondering if, and Cole says, if I knew a place you could work. As a matter of fact, I do. Why don't you meet me at the towers in 20 minutes? She's like, where the party is tonight? And he says, yeah, but that's tonight. Nobody's using it today. And she agrees, and Cole whispers to Julie that she's hired.
Julie did kind of kill it here, I must say, by using Cole's voice and playing her genius.
Yeah, definitely.
Aside from that, this feels again like a little more plot. We see that this new assistant is hired and that now Phoebe's going to some place to work that isn't the manor, which I guess is more to convince her that maybe she's better off being somewhere else.
Yeah, and this scene also answered a question I was having watching the beginning of the episode. I was like, why is Phoebe even working from home? But here, obviously, we get the idea that they're like painting the office and no one can go in. So I was like, all right, cool. That clarified a point for me because I was like, why is this even an issue right now?
Right, like she got that job with her own office from the start. Like,
Yeah.
so then back in the kitchen, Phoebe tells Piper to call her cell if she needs anything and says that she's going. She leaves. And Paige walks in and tells Piper that she did a nice job with the lights. And Piper says, I can't figure out what keeps tripping the breaker. She says maybe it's a ghost. And then Paige hands Piper a photo from the file of Leo with the ghost and his brother. Says they died the same day as Leo. Could be a reunion he wants to avoid having. Then Piper calls for him twice, and Leo orbs in and is like, What? What is it? And she holds up the photo and points to the ghost, and he says, Nathan? And she says, Yeah, we just met him. He looked good, a little transparent, but otherwise he looked pretty good for a dead guy. Talk to me. And he says, There's nothing to talk about. And then we hear a voice that says, Hey, Wyatt. And then the brothers walk through the cabinets. And Rick says, You're right, little brother. He is the spitting image of his grandfather. And he grabs a knife, and Leo says, Rick, don't. And he throws it into Leo's stomach, and Leo drops to the ground. Piper and Paige start kneeling next to him. And Nathan's like, Rick, how did he know your name? And then he pulls the knife out, and the wound heals itself. And the brothers look at each other. Then Leo gets up and says that he can explain. But Nathan pulls Rick away, and they disappear. Brutal scene. Also, I don't think we've ever seen Leo heal himself like that.
Yeah, I was about to call that out too. Like, it's always been like, oh, like I can't heal myself. Like, that's against the rules. Like, if something happens to me. But then I guess maybe like the other situations where he's not been able to heal himself has always been because of dark lighters.
Yeah. Like we know that he can't die. Like if he gets blown up or something, like he comes back, but never seen him like just pull a wound out, like an open wound out and self heal like that.
Yeah, it was definitely a cool power for them to expose, though. Yeah, I am questioning why it took 4.5 seasons for us to see that.
Right, to figure that out. But aside from that, we see that Paige and Piper are still clearly left in the dark. I'm sure we'll be getting some answers on that in the next scene. But now the brothers know that Leo is a white lighter or some sort of immortal being.
Definitely. And I also like how quick they are. Like they just are like, "Hey Wyatt," and throw a knife at him right away. Like no conversation.
Hesitation at all. They were just ready to kill the grandson and be over with.
Yeah, I also like how Leo was still gonna like not tell Piper anything after she's like, we saw their ghost," and he's like, "There's nothing to talk about." Like
Yeah, like what do you mean? There's plenty. Why did they come here then?
literally, like, okay, Leo, like keep your secrets.
That desperate to gatekeep.
So then we're in the living room, and Piper, Paige, and Leo are sitting there. And Leo says, I can't believe they've been holding on this long just to hurt me. And Paige doesn't get why they aren't transparent anymore. And Leo says, they've been practicing corporealizing so they can move things. And Piper says, yeah, like butcher's knives. And he says, well, they've been holding on to their pain. That's what keeps them from moving on. And she's like, their pain? Leo, they just tried to kill you. Paige says, yeah, lucky they're not darklighters. Otherwise, you would have been killed again. And he says, you don't understand. We were friends. We grew up together in Burlingame. I went to school with Nathan. When the war came, we made a deal with our recruitment officer that we would enlist as long as they kept us in the same unit. Paige says you were close. Piper says, so, what did they think you did? And there's a moment of silence, and Leo tells them about an ambush on the island with lots of injuries and bodies. He says, then I heard Rick's voice.
I just have to say, the emotion in that like Brian Cross plays throughout like his scenes telling the story is so intense. Like you can really feel it. He's killing it here.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes that really reminds me what a strong actor he is. Because so often we see Leo just kind of like being in the background of the sisters' stories. But when he has like emotional scenes to do or like big work to do, like he delivers every time. Like he's very talented and he does a great job throughout this episode.
Oh, absolutely, like without fail. And we could see here that Leo's clearly holding on to some sort of guilt that he feels, and the sisters don't quite understand like how he can be so calm about these people trying to kill him right now. Where Leo seems to like understand where they're coming from. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we're also obviously getting the background here that him and Nathan are like the same age, and Rick, I guess, is Nathan's older brother. They all enlisted together. So I think this is the point where I'm going to bring up the fact that Nathan and Leo are apparently 18, and I guess Rick is like a couple years older than them, so like maybe 22. In what universe are any of these men 18 to 22 years old?
They don't look like it at all. Like, come on now, please be so for real.
Like these are 30 something year old men on my screen.
But if you say so,
Yeah, I guess we'll just accept that this is apparently what teenagers looked like in the 1940s.
naturally, of course. So then it goes into a flashback from the war where Rick is calling for Leo and carrying Nathan, who was hit. And he sends another medic with a patient to a Jeep. Then he runs over to them. And they take Nathan into the med unit and start treating him. And Leo asks about the other soldiers. And Rick says that there are 15 or 20 out there, but Rick says that they need him. And Leo asks if there's a medic out in the field, and he leaves a nurse to treat Nathan and says that he has to go help the others. But Rick doesn't understand and he wants Leo to take care of Nathan. Leo says there's men dying on that field. And Rick's like, you're going to choose them over us? And he says, I'm sorry. And Leo runs off. And Rick says, we're your friends. Nathan's going to die. Don't let him die, Wyatt. And then an airdrop comes down and blows up the medic tent. And Leo is knocked over. And he looks back and sees that everybody inside, Nathan, Rick, and the nurse, are all dead.
So this is horrible. For one, we're seeing that obviously, like, a medical tent was blown up, which is just beyond terrible. We're seeing here, obviously, where the grudge is coming from, in that Leo chose to go help the other soldiers rather than stay with Rick and Nathan. So I think now we can understand where the grudge is coming from. And like you said before, why they might have think he survived the battle when they didn't.
Exactly. And as much as we can clearly see or like understand as outsiders why that's not on Leo, what he was doing was leaving someone to take care of Nathan, but also going out there to help the 15 to 20 other men that are dying out there, you know?
Yeah, like Leo had no way of predicting that that tent was going to get blown up and they were going to die, right? Like what he thought he was doing was leaving the nurse to take care of Nathan so that he could come back later and help after he helps these other people who also need him.
Absolutely. And as much as it's very unwarranted for Rick to kind of make him feel guilty for that, you can understand where it's kind of coming from with Rick in like a selfish point of view. Like to him, his brother's about to die and he's angry and he needs something to blame and he puts it on Leo, you know? But it really, Leo couldn't have done anything at that moment, anyways. He would have just died with them.
But also, I mean, if we go to the moment like before their death, right? I get why he is begging Leo to just stay and help Nathan, right? And I understand like as like a sibling, like I would react the same way if it was like one of you guys, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it
that's what I'm
completely
saying.
makes sense in character, yeah.
Most definitely. I 100% agree. I mean, as much as it's not fair, as a sibling myself, and you know, if I felt like, how could you like turn your back on him right now when you're basically family to us too, you know?
Yeah.
So I do understand where Rick's coming from with that and why Leo would probably feel a little guilty in that sense as well.
Yeah, and I think this is showing some of like who Leo is as a person and the reason he did become a white lighter, which is going to be called out next scene, but I'll just say it here because it's the same lesson like the sisters have learned, right? Like you put saving lots of innocence over saving your one family member when that's the decision you have to make. And that's what makes him
Absolutely.
truly good.
Absolutely. And that's what makes him like completely and totally selfless as well.
Yeah. So then we come out of the flashback. We're in the living room. We see Leo is crying, and Piper looks over at him and he says, I should have stayed. I should have tried to save Nathan and get him out of there. And Piper walks over and says, then you would have all died in the tent. And all the guys in the field that you did save would have died too. You did the right thing. And Paige walks over and says, and Leo, for God's sakes, you were awarded the Medal of Honor. Posthumously, I might add. And he moves away and he says, yeah, I didn't deserve it. And Piper says, right. So I suppose you didn't deserve to be a white lighter for sacrificing your life to save others. He says, were those lives any more important than Nathan's or Rick's or anyone else in that tent? You know, a good friend put his life in my hands and I left him to die. All the good that I've done since then can't erase that fact. Maybe I didn't deserve to become a white lighter. And Paige says, hey, newsflash, friends don't kill each other, okay? I say we douse their dusty bones with our magic potion and vanquish their sorry asses. And Leo says, no, you can't do that. They didn't do anything wrong. And Piper says, okay, so what do you suggest? He says, I don't know. If I could talk to them, make them understand why I did what I did, then maybe they could move on. And Piper says, maybe you all can. We need to find where they're buried so we can summon them before they try to hurt anybody else. And Paige says, yeah, like us.
It's so devastating here seeing Leo. Like the sisters fully understand and they're doing their best to like be there for him, but let him know like, hey, you can't hold this and blame yourself forever, you know? Like you did a lot of good. But for Leo, and I feel like for anyone in that position, they'd feel exactly the same way, the same amount of guilt, you know? Like these were people that he loved and lost when he, in his mind, thinks he could have protected them, even though we obviously know that that wouldn't have saved any of them in the end, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Leo's very clearly dealing with survivor guilt, which I
Hmm.
think has a lot to do with part of why he wanted to erase his past and like doesn't talk about it, right? This whole time, like it adds up seeing that this was his experience. The day he died, like this is what happened to him.
Hmm.
We also obviously see the idea that he questions his decision and he wonders again, like, why those other lives he saved were worth more than the ones that he couldn't save. And it
Right.
was that, of course, sacrifice that he does end up making that brings him to being a white lighter and him feeling like he doesn't even deserve that.
Yeah, he's very much feeling that, like, why was I given this chance when all the other men on that field worked just as hard and fought just as hard, and I'm the one that left a friend to die, you know? So it is a very severe case of survivor's guilt, and the fact that not only did he survive, but he's being awarded for it, and he definitely doesn't feel like he deserves it at all, you know?
Definitely, definitely. And also explains, you know, the Medal of Honor being taken or hidden away and all those types of things that we're going through. I also like the way at the end of this scene that Piper is so supportive of his idea of like wanting to help them and saying, you know, maybe you all can move on if you have this conversation with them. And like this would be healing not just in getting them to finally not be ghosts anymore, but in getting Leo to forgive himself for what happened.
Yeah, Piper being so, like, on his side and helping him get through this is just, oh, this is why they are the it couple right here. Amazing.
Yeah. And it's really like bringing me back to earlier in the season when Piper was the one going through it after losing Prue and Leo was so supportive of her. And now we see that like with a role reversal, she does the same for him. Like that really intense partnership that is just so beautiful to watch between them.
Genuinely, it is like that have each other's backs no matter what. And however Leo feels is the best way to go about this, that's what Piper's going to support because it's his past that he needs to come to terms with. And at the end of the day, that's all she wants for him.
Yes, definitely.
So then back at the veteran office, Rick says, "A white lighter? I can't believe they made him a freaking angel. I mean, how could they reward him for turning his back on his friends?" And Nathan says, "Yeah, but did you see the look on his face when he saw us? Guilt, total guilt. At least he knows he's living a life built on our corpses." And Rick says, "So what? Who cares? I still want him dead." And he throws a chair into a glass case. And Nathan says, "You can't kill a white lighter." And he says, "Maybe not, but we can hurt him by taking the things that he holds dear. Make him dread his eternal life. We can punish him, make him feel like a fraud he is by killing the ones he loves. Who knows? Maybe then we will be able to kill him." And he throws a table over and says, "Payback is a bitch." So, new plan for them. Clearly, like we can see here, Rick is feeling a lot more intense, like if anything, more angry and willing to sacrifice innocent lives, more so than obviously just the grandson that he thought he was going to kill before. He's going to sacrifice a bunch of innocent people over this grudge. And you can kind of tell in Nathan's face and kind of reaction to this scene that he doesn't really feel like that's as necessary, but I think he'll go along with whatever Rick says.
Yeah, I think the same. I think at this point, Nathan feels very much like a follower of his brother. Like he's just going to go along with whatever his brother says, but does question it a little bit. He's kind of like, look, like he's obviously guilty. There's nothing we can do. But then
Mm-hmm.
once Rick comes up with this plan, he's like, I guess I'll do it. You know what I mean?
Right. Like, if you say so, buddy, why not? Aside from that, it really just shows the anger and the hurt that they're both still feeling. Nathan obviously being a little more accepting of this fact than Brick is. And it just kind of tells us what their future plan is. That my guess would be that he would come after the wife, so Piper.
Yeah, I would guess the same thing. So then we're at the towers, and Cole and Phoebe walk into this super nice suite. And Phoebe's like, wow, are you kidding me? And he says, the firm leases it for parties, retreats, special occasions. I think you qualify. And he tells her to listen, and she doesn't hear anything. And he says, exactly. He tells her that the caterers are coming at 4 and that it's hers till then. And Phoebe says, and you won't get in trouble? He says, I'm already in trouble. I'm in love. And she laughs and, like, kind of playfully hits him on the shoulder and then asks if he was serious about getting a place together and mentions that a Hallowell away from the manor has never been done before. He says, I like a challenge. She says, it's not that I don't want to, it's just, how do I break up the power of 3? And he sits across from her and says, you guys don't have to keep living together to be charmed. Not anymore. The source is dead. Leo can orb you back at a moment's notice. So can Paige, for that matter. If we don't do it now, then when? She says, Piper will kill me. He says, the manor's too crowded. There's not enough room. Hell, there's not enough electricity. She says, or privacy. He says, just enjoy your peace here today. We'll talk more tonight at the party. And then she realizes that she didn't bring anything to wear, and he says that he'll take care of everything.
Look at him playing husband of the freaking year right now. Unbelievable. Poor Phoebe must be so smitten, just feel so much love when really he's got this underground plan all along. Or below
I
the surface,
know.
yeah.
Like, Phoebe must be thinking, like, wow, I'm in the perfect marriage. Like, everything is so great. I do have a couple things I am thinking here. Oh, first, I mean, I guess because I remember we were talking earlier about how Cole was always worried about Phoebe being safe, whatever. I think he brings up a valid point of like why that's not a concern anymore, in that they're no longer being attacked by the source that they know of. So
I was
that
thinking the
actually
same
does
exact thing.
work really well for me there, bringing that up. And then, of course, bringing up that there are multiple people in the family who can orb. So it's not like she has to drive across town like if it was season 1.
Yeah, no, he brings up valid points that like I forgot that he even mentions this earlier when we were talking about it. But yeah, I mean the logic is there. It's understandable. And I mean, it wouldn't take much to convince me at that point. Like if I was Phoebe, I'd be like, he's standing on a point or two. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, I think if I was Phoebe, I would also be like leaning towards being very convinced about this. Like, he is making a lot of good points. She is saying, like, she also wants the privacy for them. I think it's different than in Piper's situation where her and Leo got to have the bigger room. And, like, I don't think Piper really wanted to move out. Like, I think she was doing it because it's what she felt like she should do and for Leo. Whereas I think Phoebe has always had more independence than Piper, and this is something she would have eventually wanted anyway.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the same thing. I mean, Phoebe is really the only Halliwell who ever has lived on her own. She's always been the one to kind of make that first leap to leave the house. Whereas Piper, I think, is a little more dependent and attached to living with her family, you know?
Yeah. I also want to bring up it's really weird that Cole's job supposedly just keeps this like super nice apartment for parties, especially when we find out at the end of the episode that it's like a legit apartment with like a bedroom and stuff. Like, why the fuck do they have this for parties? Like, they're like employees, like, go fuck at the end of the party. Like, why do they have this?
It makes no sense. It's a law firm. Like, what?
Like if it was just like a big like party space, I'd be like, yeah, they have like company events there.
Hmm.
But like, why do they have this? It makes no sense.
Zero logic behind it,
Whatever, plot sake.
per usual. Then we go to the elevator, and Cole goes into it, and Julie's already in there. She says, going down. And he says, my wife needs a dress for the party tonight. Julie shows him a couple of options, and he says that the first option's too safe, the second option would get her too noticed, and the third one is perfect. And then she asks if he wants to see the second again, of course. And he says, just save it, okay? I'm not interested. I'm a one woman demon. And she says, you're the boss. And then he flames out and she shimmers out.
So, one thing I want to say, like the red dress that she shows as the second option, I don't think is like a cocktail dress. So, I don't even get why that would be an option. And like I don't think it's like ridiculously like he's like, "Oh, that would get her to notice." Like I don't think it's ridiculously like sexy or anything like that. Like I actually think that the third option is very sexy. Not necessarily appropriate for an office party, but like very nice. Like I liked that one. And like the first one, I get why he was like, "Oh, too safe," because Phoebe does have a more like sexy way of dressing most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought the third option, which it makes sense why he picks it, was just as like sexually provocative as the second option, which I felt like looked like a college or a high school girl would wear to like a dance or something, if I'm being honest.
I mean, I don't know. I think that the third option was like equally very sexy, yes, but a little more appropriate for an office party. Like
Yeah,
the
no,
second one was just
definitely.
completely unprofessional. Like it definitely
Yeah.
makes no sense that that would be an option at all.
Like it looks like something someone would wear to like a college formal or something. It doesn't look like something you would wear to a business dinner, so I really don't understand why it was an option.
Me neither. It also, this whole scene just felt very unnecessary. Like, you could have ran home and got Phoebe a dress, or she could have ran home. Like, they didn't have to include that situation at all. It just felt very much like showing off. I don't know. It didn't seem important to me at all.
They just wanted her to hit on Cole again so that he could make that point of like, listen, like it's only Phoebe for me.
Right. Which, I mean, good, but I mean, he should have just said that from the start, anyways.
No, literally. Like the first time she was like, oh, like any part you want. Like he should have been like, no.
Yeah, back off.
So then we go back to the manor and we're in the parlor, and Paige found Rick and Nathan are buried at the local VA. And Piper asks where the book is for the summoning spell, and Paige already wrote it down on a piece of paper. And Paige says, who you gonna call? And Piper's like, cute. And then Leo hears the jingle and says, it's Maria, the teacher. She's in trouble. I have to go to her. Then we see Nathan and Rick are transparent and they're like kind of popping their heads through the wall. And Paige says, But what about the ghosts? I thought we had to find them before they hurt someone else. He says if something happens to one of my charges, and Piper tells him to go and to meet them when he's done, and they start heading out. Then we cut outside where we see Nathan and Rick like come out of the wall, and Nathan says, "Should we wait for the sisters to separate?" And he says, "No, we'll come back for them later. We're following Wyatt." And Nathan says, "Wyatt, why?" And Rick says, "Because nothing pushes a white lawyer over the edge faster than losing a charge." And he disappears, and then Nathan does too.
Oh, they got him there. They know. They just know how to get him.
Mm-hmm.
Going after one of those charges. This is so fucked.
Yeah. I mean, both of these scenes are really just set up. So I don't really have too much to say here other than the fact that, I mean, again, Nathan is a little bit more like, okay, like let's
Hesitant.
go after someone he loves, and Rick is very willing to like adjust to a new plan.
Yeah, Rick is just like anything and everything we can do to hurt this man is what we're gonna have to do right now.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
Nathan's just kind of the tag along, like, okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to point out, like, when has Leo ever been like, oh, first and last name, address, and social security number of my charge needs help. Gotta go. Like, why is he just like he's never been like, oh, Maria, my charge, the teacher at this one place, she needs my help. I gotta go. Like, he's usually just like, oh, someone's in trouble, gotta go. You know, like I got other charges to take care of. That's it.
Yeah. He did
Like
give a
that.
lot of information, though, like, he didn't give the location, I don't think. So I'm not sure exactly how they follow him.
Me neither. No idea.
Plot sake.
So then we go to Maria's apartment, and the student from earlier, Greg, is holding up a knife and threatening her. And Leo walks in and tries to defuse the situation, but then Greg grabs him and holds the knife to him, and Maria tells him not to. And he says, listen, Teach, you got me in a whole lot of trouble here, and now somebody's got to pay. Then Leo tells her not to be afraid, and he says that Leo should be afraid. And Maria's like, don't be stupid. And he says, stupid? Is that what I am? Maria says, if you hurt him, you will be. It'll be the stupidest thing you've ever done, and there won't be any coming back from it, and your life will be over. Greg says, my life's already over. She says, no, it's not. Not yet. It takes more courage to put down that knife than to use it. And she says, believe me, give me the knife, Greg. He says, you'll call the police. She says, no, I won't. Then he looks at her and Leo and then back at her and runs out, dropping the knife. And she asks Leo if he's all right. And Leo's like, you did a good job teaching him a lesson. She says, thanks to you. Like, what did I do? He says, help me to remember why I wanted to be a teacher. Then Rick comes through the door and picks up the knife and stabs her, covering her mouth. And Nathan tackles Leo to the ground and holds him. Rick walks over and says, you watch her die like you watched us die. And then her spirit leaves her body while Leo tries to fight them off, and they let go of him once she's actually dead. And he says, her blood is on your hands. Then he runs over to heal her, but it's too late. And Leah's like, she didn't do anything. She was innocent. And Rick says, so were we. And they disappear.
So, to go to the beginning of this scene before we get into that intensity at the end,
Mm-hmm.
I want to just say that, like, the writers' like way of capturing like a quote unquote street youth was like the worst writing I've ever seen in this show.
I'm so thought so too, because I was like, what the fuck? Who acts like that? Who talks like that?
Like it was so poorly done. Like I don't know what they're going for. And the only thing I could say in terms of like the way they wrote this and the way it was, I am so glad they cast a white person and not someone of a different ethnicity because it would have been so much more offensive had they cast someone who was black or Latino in that role.
I think all around, this was just like, I don't know, dialogue and everything and the way they make them sound. It was just so unrealistic. Like,
It was, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it would have, it definitely would have came across more offensive, but like at the end of the day, there was no winning with the way they set this up.
No, no, no. Like it was a bad scene. It just would have been like offensive the other way. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I didn't even write down most of the dialogue because it was that bad. I was like, I'm not even writing this. It's a waste of my fucking typing time. Like, no.
so bad. I remember vividly every time I see it, I'm like the scene gets emotional towards the end, like it hurts, but yeah, the whole beginning part and the
Like
setup
I want
just
to laugh at it because it's so bad.
exactly like I don't know about all this. But either way, I guess she talked him down and isn't gonna call the cops. Like this guy is clearly sick. You have to do something.
Yeah, like that's another thing too, because like I get that what they're trying to do is like, oh, like she's helping him by not getting him into legal trouble. But like, even if you're not gonna call the cops, like maybe contact like a social worker or something, because like there's something wrong with this kid and he needs like emotional mental help.
Yeah, like this guy is still like, yeah, you're good for now. He didn't kill this guy and he has that emotional like, realization, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be the last time something like this happens. And I mean, a 2-second conversation is not going to fix somebody who's clearly that messed up in the head that they're willing to do something like this?
Exactly. And it's like, I think what they're trying to portray here with like the bad dialogue is basically that Maria teaches probably at like a lower income school. So I
Hmm.
get what they're doing in the fact that, like, in situations like that, you don't want to call the cops on the kid because of the whole, like, the way the school to like prison system works in low income communities. Like, that makes total sense to me. But like, you still need to do something. Like you said, having a 2 minute conversation with someone who's clearly in such emotional distress that they're showing up to your house with a knife. Like,
Threatening a
they
total
need
stranger, like,
serious
yeah,
help.
like a social worker or something, somebody who can get them on a better track. I don't know. Or like, I mean, I don't know, like what's gonna happen? He's gonna show back up to school the next day or something? Like, I don't know. It's definitely very, very odd to me. And then her reaction just immediately being like, well, now I know why I wanted to be a teacher. Like, what?
Like,
I
if
don't
she
know.
was a social worker instead of a teacher and this situation happened, I feel like it would have made a lot more sense. Because she's like,
Absolutely.
I wanted to help kids who were like in danger of having mental health crises like these. So that would make more sense. But like, as a teacher, like, this is not your job. You are not equipped to deal with this type of situation.
Yeah, that you have no idea how to respond to something like this. It's just not how it works. If she had been someone in a different position, I think it would have made a lot more sense here.
Yeah. And the whole like cheesy line of like, oh, like you taught him a lesson, like more bad dialogue.
Agreed.
But to move on from that to the end of the scene where we obviously get a huge turn of events. I mean, the convenient knife drop so that Rick and Nathan could stab her. I think that was the only thing the writers did right in the first half of the scene was dropping that knife so we could have this moment. Like that worked really well. That was a smart plot device. And then obviously seeing Leo wanting to save her, them preventing it, his reaction when he runs over to her and sees she's dead, and just Rick's final line, so were we. Like, it hit me. Like, it's
Yeah.
hard to be on his side in a lot of this episode, but in the moment where, like, he's calling for Leo to come back to help Nathan, and in that moment, I do genuinely relate to him. And I think they try to make us less sympathetic by one, having him kill that security guard earlier, and then this moment where, like, because I can even kind of sympathize with him in this moment, even though he killed Maria. But then I remember he's already been a killer, and I'm like, this is a bad guy.
Yeah, he's not a great dude. Like at the end of the day, he must have become some sort of vengeful spirit obviously immediately, and even though he used to be some like a decent dude, he's a wreck now, and I don't know, like it's easy to feel sympathy for the pain he felt, but it's not easy to feel sympathy for the actions that he's doing because of it?
Yeah. Like, I still sympathize with Nathan. I don't sympathize with Rick because like, we've seen him be so evil. Like, first, when he was going to keep, like, scaring that woman to death, probably, then kills the security guard and then does this.
Yeah,
Like, Nathan, don't get me wrong, he was just as culpable in this death, but, like, he doesn't have the same, like, violent anger thus far that Rick does, so it's easier to sympathize with him.
absolutely. So now in the entryway at the manor, it's like nighttime. Piper and Paige walk in, and Piper wants Paige to get the vanquishing spell while she calls for Leo. Then Paige asks if she means the potion because the spell only works if you're dead, and Piper says, right, whatever. Then she calls for him again, and Paige is like, so does that mean we're not interested in helping them move on? And she says, to hell, maybe. That's what they deserve. We went to the VA to help misguided ghosts, not killer ghosts. And Paige says, we don't know for sure that they killed that guard. Then Piper looks at her, and Paige says she'll go get the potion. Then Phoebe comes down the stairs in her dress and spins for them, asking what they think. And Paige says she looks beautiful, and Piper says that Cole's splurging. Phoebe's like, and I am not complaining. I enjoy being the belle of the ball. Piper says, well, sorry, Cinderella, but the ball's been canceled. We have killer ghosts. And Phoebe laughs, and she's like, you're kidding. But Piper looks at her, and she's like, you're not kidding. Okay, well, is it possible that you guys could maybe handle this without me? And Paige says, Phoebe, they tried to kill Leo. Grudge from the past. I'll go do the potion. And Phoebe says she'll call Cole to tell him no to the party and for everything. And Piper asks what she means, and she tells them about moving out. She's like, like normal married couples do. Piper's like, we didn't. She's like, yeah, but you're not normal. Piper says, neither are you. She's like, look, I don't want to fight about this, but I don't like feeling that sometimes I have to choose between my sister and my husband. She says, it's not about that, and you know it. Phoebe says, how long are we going to stay here? Another year? Another 5 years? Another 50 years? I mean, at what point do we move on with our lives and not let evil dictate them? Piper says, you're right. Go to your party. We'll take care of the ghosts. And Phoebe's like, you hate me right now. She says, no, I don't. And Paige says, yes, she does. And Piper says, look, we can talk about this later. Right now, you need to go take your man, and I need to take care of mine. We don't need the power of three to do this. Then Piper walks off, and Phoebe goes. Paige walks over to Piper and says, I've got a bone to pick, seeing as you practically forced me to move in here. Piper smiles and then gets serious and says, where's Leo? I already called for him twice. And she calls again, but then tells Paige to try to sense him, and we hear the white lighter jingle. And she says, I think he's in trouble. Then Piper tells her to go find him, and she orbs out.
So to start at the beginning of the scene, obviously we're getting some hints here with the vanquishing spell being mentioned for the second time. I mean, spoiler to the end of the episode, but that's what's happening there. We're getting some foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have obviously Piper calling for Leo, and because the scene, takes over, we forget until the end that he never shows up. Obviously, we find out that they found out about the security guard being murdered, and now Piper no longer has an interest in helping them. And Phoebe coming down, she does look very beautiful. I do want to point out that I think this is the first episode where we see them, including Alyssa Milano's tattoos. I know earlier seasons they were covering them up, but in this episode we see the one on her back, and we also see the one like right below her hip bone. So I did want to say that this is, I think, where the show starts accepting that the actresses have tattoos and not trying to hide it, because later on we'll see that like Holly Marie Combs has multiple tattoos as well.
I guess I didn't even really notice that they were covering them up in the beginning.
Yeah, no, they were. I think I pointed it out once in season one because like they covered Alyssa Milano's tattoo, but in a way where you could still kind of see it. Like it didn't look good. Like you could tell there was something there under the like skin color thing that was like discoloration, it looked like. I think because now like we have such HD ways of watching TV that maybe in 1998 we wouldn't have seen it, but like on
Right.
today's quality TV, it's very obvious to see.
Yeah, definitely.
But aside from that tattoo tangent that I just had to bring up, we also get a sister scene here between Phoebe and Piper that Paige is sort of a part of. And yeah, I mean, there are some moments that are good in it where
You think
Piper.
so? You really think so? I hated Phoebe in this. I hated her.
Well, I just meant in the terms of how understanding Piper is. Like, it's a nice moment for them as sisters and how supportive Piper is. But I do have some thoughts on like the way Phoebe's acting, which I'll get to.
Yeah, it was definitely like sweet of Piper to be very understanding and everything. I don't know, like maybe it's just me, but I think they've all had to make sacrifices for certain things. And just because they need her help right now during this doesn't mean that like she couldn't you know, like they couldn't have just picked her up if she had moved away. Like that doesn't change the fact that you could still move out. It just means that, you know, maybe cancel your plans tonight. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it didn't it felt very, very selfish to me. And for her to immediately be like turn the conversation onto her and be like, oh, I guess I'll just cancel and tell him no to everything. Like, I'm sorry, can we pause this? Can we talk about this later when my husband isn't fucking dying? Like, isn't being attacked by killer ghosts? Like
Yeah.
this, like, are you like this is really about you
I
right now?
think if it were any other situation and Leo wasn't the one in danger, I would understand where Phoebe's coming from more because as we learned in season one, ghosts are not something that require the power of three. So, like, if it wasn't Leo's life at risk, right? Because Leo is family to them. Like they've been through everything with Leo. There's no reason why Phoebe should be turning her back on him, other than the thing I'll bring up in 1 second. So if it were another situation, I would understand her being like, well, can't we try to make this like not a power of three thing since we don't need the power of three, right? I could understand that point of view. And we've seen most of the sisters choose their man over a situation before. It wouldn't be like a first time for that. I do want to say that maybe the reason why Phoebe is being so selfish and unreasonable here and so dedicated to making Cole happy
Because
is
of the
because,
baby.
yes,
I knew
because
it.
we learned that with the tonic, if Phoebe was pregnant, it would also lead her to get more attached to Cole and move towards her evil leanings in being with him. So this is making me suspect that Phoebe may be pregnant, and that's why she's starting to choose Cole over her sisters here.
Okay, I can definitely understand that reasoning. And I'm actually glad that you said that because beforehand it was just very much like a screw you kind of thing. Like you said, like Leo is family, and if it was Piper at risk, she wouldn't turn to Paige and be like, "Oh, can you handle this without me?" You know what I mean? It doesn't it's not very Phoebe, and it felt a little like messed up to me. Like I understand where she's coming from, but at the end of the day, I don't think that she should be complaining like she is right now. But if she did get pregnant from the tonic, then I can totally understand why she's starting to feel a little more of a connection towards Cole than she is with this attachment to her sisters, you know? That would make a lot of sense.
And like in terms of the part I was talking about as far as like a sister moment, I do like the way that Piper won't say that she hates Phoebe, right? She's like, you know what? I have to save my man, but if what you have to do is go be with Cole, then do that. Like, I also think part of it is that Piper's not willing to waste time arguing with her sister when she obviously has to take care of Leo in this moment. And she's like, you know what? Let Phoebe do what she wants. I have Paige. We'll figure this out. And I like the way that then Paige kind of calls it out. And she's like, look at the way you've been with me. And now look how you're letting Phoebe do whatever she wants, kind of thing. So, like, I like that aspect of the sisterliness of this scene as well, like, kind of calling out a little bit of hypocrisy in that moment. But I
Yeah, I
guess
feel
it
like
also brings back the whole like marriage connection that Piper and Phoebe were having all last episode, too.
agreed. But I feel like Paige is definitely like coming into her she's a very like she'll let you know kind of person. Like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't add up. You guys aren't seeing this? Like and for her to be like, yeah, she does hate you. Like, why are you what are you doing right now? This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. I don't know. But
And then being like, you begged me to move in and now Phoebe can move out. Like, what the fuck?
right. And the like the kind of subtle dig from Piper where she's like, you go take care of your man, I have to take care of mine. Like, what do you have to do for Cole? Attend a party? Like, come on now.
I think my headcanon, Piper wants Cole to stay rich because Piper still is sick of people not paying bills at their household.
Gotta be it. Gotta be, right?
She's like,
Absolutely.
Cole's work is important because he can contribute to our bills. But though, if they're moving out, she shouldn't think that anymore. So,
This is true. But then maybe they'll have less
but also then she
electricity,
doesn't
less
have to
mouths
support
to
Phoebe
feed.
anymore. So,
Exactly. Less mouths to feed, less everything, you know?
and then at the end of the scene, we obviously just have that reminder that Leo never showed up. Paige gaining a new power. She senses Leo, right? Piper kind of
Hmm.
talks her through that. And then we see that he's in trouble and Piper sends her to go find out what's going on.
I like that because Leo's not Paige's charge, so I don't know how she was able to sense him, but maybe they have some sort of white lighter to white lighter thing, or just
That's
that
what
family
I was
connection like we were
thinking
talking about before.
because I'm pretty sure, and like maybe I'm misremembering, but I think that like Natalie and Leo were also able to sense each other in that episode. Like I think white lighters can pick up on other white lighters. Paige has just never done it before.
Yeah, I definitely think that could be the case as well. So then we're back at Maria's apartment, and we see Leo is sitting next to her body, crying, and Paige orbs in behind him and walks over. And Leo says, I tried to stop them, but I couldn't. And she helps him up and brings him to a chair, asking what happened, and says that they're getting even. She says that she'll take him home, and he says, no, I don't have my powers anymore. She's like, how? And he says, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have been given them in the first place. And she says, that is not true. Your powers must be tied to your emotions like ours. That means you can get them back. You just have to pick yourself up. Don't let them defeat you. You are not responsible for their actions. And he says, aren't I? They're ghosts because of me. Their rage comes from something that I did. If I can just give myself to them. And she says, they'd kill you because without your powers, you're defenseless, like a mortal. And he looks at her and she says that they need to go home. And he freaks out and says, no one else is going to die because of him. These are my demons, not yours. She says that she's going to go get Phoebe and Piper and that she'll come back. And she orbs out. He's so
So
emotional here, my heart.
I know. This is again another really strong performance from him. I also really like Paige in this scene. She's such a no nonsense person. Like she's not like a sit there and just like comfort you and say what you want to hear. Like that's not Paige as a person. Like she's going to be like, "No, like this is it." Like she's helpful and like cares so much, you can tell, but like she doesn't sugarcoat things. Like I feel like Piper is
Yeah.
the type of person who's like a little bit more of a yes man, whereas Paige is much more of a like this is what it is. Like I love you, but like she kind of reminds me of you in that way, I think.
Yeah, she's definitely very much like that, very straight to the point and like, hey, like I understand your pain and what you're thinking, but you're wrong. It just doesn't make sense. So stop, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of just how she tends to go about things regularly. So I do really respect that like part of her, the straight to the point while still kind of being there for them.
Definitely. And I do like, again, the way that Leo is really like down on himself, this idea that he's lost his powers because he's really like lost faith in himself and his ability to help people after the way he wasn't able to save Maria. Though, like, I feel like this isn't the first time he's lost a charge, but this is the first time it was directly because of him, because this was all because of a vendetta against him. So I think that's kind of what explains why this hasn't happened in other cases like that.
Right. No, I definitely agree because the rest of them weren't because he wasn't like Maria had a lot more time on her. She was only attacked to get to him. And he knew that this solely had to do with him and it wasn't fair to her that she had to suffer the consequences because of his wrongdoings in the past, or you know what I mean, what he felt was his wrongdoings in the past.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, Paige ultimately not feeling like she can handle this situation herself and needing to get Phoebe and Piper makes total sense to me, especially having to get Piper, because I feel like where Leo's at, Piper is probably the only person in the world who, like, can convince him to come back to himself.
Absolutely. I definitely agree.
So then we cut outside and we see that Rick and Nathan are there, and Rick says, defenseless as a mortal, huh? We've got him right where we want him. And Nathan says, I don't know, Rick. He says, you don't know? After waiting all this time, you're having second thoughts? He says, no, just the opposite. Doesn't feel like it's enough just killing him. I want him to suffer first. And Rick says, follow me. And they disappear.
Nathan, my guy, where did
The
this come
switch
from?
up was crazy. I liked it. It was a very surprising twist. Like it's like he found the evil within, I guess, after like being part of this murder. So like I liked it. I thought it was really interesting because I thought he was gonna like talk Rick down or something, and then you
Hmm.
get that like, no, like let's make this worse. Like fuck him up.
Yeah, killing him still isn't enough for them, you know? I think it was very much like Nathan was like, but then like kind of got that reminder of what they were doing it for. And I think once he saw that pain in Leo, he felt this sense of like satisfaction,
Hmm.
and it just brought out that evil in him, like you said.
And I will say, like, did they just suddenly develop like super hearing? Because last scene they had to be leaning into the wall to hear things, and now all of a sudden they're like outside on the grass and could just hear what's going on up in the apartment.
Yeah, like how'd they know that he doesn't have his powers anymore? It made no sense.
Like, did they leave a fucking recording device in there and they're listening? Like,
Who knows?
plot sake.
So then back at the towers, we see this like very busy party, and Cole and Phoebe are dancing together, and Phoebe says, "Penny for your thoughts, counselor." And he says, "I'm just hoping that I never disappoint you." She says, "I wouldn't worry about that." And then a man walks over saying how lucky they are to have him, like how the company is so lucky to have Cole. And then he goes, and Phoebe's like, "Baby, I'm so proud of you. You have come so far, further than anyone else in this room could even imagine, even me. I'm seeing you in a totally different light." He says, "We've both come a long way. We all deserve this and more." She says, "It's just everything's happening so fast, you know, so many changes. It's a little scary sometimes." And he says, "So maybe we shouldn't move out of the manor then?" And she's like, maybe. Now who's disappointing who? And he says, "You could never disappoint me." And then they kiss, and Paige appears next to them and says, "Sorry to interrupt." And Phoebe's like, "Paige, what are you doing here?" And she says, "I thought I'd track you down first. Leo needs our help, bad." And her and Cole look at each other, and he's like, "By all means, go." And they kiss, and she runs out, and then he looks down very angry.
So this scene again is really giving me that baby hint because, like, when has Phoebe ever asked for Cole's permission to do something?
Exactly. Like, she's never looked at him like that. And for her to be like, "I'm seeing you in a totally different light now," and blah, 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 it's just very like, it's subtle hints about the possible baby. I'm thinking, you know, I didn't even see it that way any of the times I've watched it, but it definitely makes sense, like analyzing it right now.
Yeah, like something about her is very clearly changing between the way we saw Phoebe last episode and how we're seeing her in this episode.
I definitely agree. And aside from that, I do like that we still do have like our Phoebe is still in there, you know, it's still there. Where once Paige says like Leo needs her help really bad, you can see that she does feel like, oh God, like what happened, you know?
Yeah, and I think also the way she's rethinking moving out of the manor, right? She's like, is this the
Hmm.
right decision? This is pulling me away from helping my sisters. So, like, we're still seeing that glimpse of the Phoebe who we've always known.
Of course, Cole is not having this.
No. And I, again, it's that like manipulative nature where like he acts like everything's fine, but then the second she's gone, like the facade drops and we know that he's pissed.
Oh, absolutely.
So then we're in the manor in the attic, and there are candles lit, and Piper's working on the potion. Rick walks in through the wall and picks up a knife from the altar and throws it at her, but she freezes it and then makes it drop to the ground and says, "I'll kill you." And he says, "That potion only works on my bones, remember?" And then Nathan appears behind her and stabs her in the stomach as she turns to him. So Nathan gets his first kill question mark. She drops to the floor and they go over and Rick covers her mouth and says, "No calling out for help, Mrs. Wyatt, not this time. Not that he could help you anyway." And Nathan starts saying that they should go, but Rick wants to stay and enjoy it. And then he like sticks his transparent hand through her stomach, and Piper is like gasping and choking and sweating, and then she passes out. Phoebe and Paige come in and run over to her, checking for a pulse, and the ghosts say that they'll be back and then like disappear out.
Intense. We see Nathan like attacking our girl right here. What are we gonna do?
I also like am really interested in the way like Nathan just wants to do it and like get the fuck out, but like Rick wants to stay and like take pleasure in the kill. So like another separation on their levels of evil in my mind.
Yeah, it's still they're still showing us and pretty much guaranteeing us that Rick is the more intense evildoer in this dynamic duo here, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I like Piper in this scene a lot. Like the way she's so confident, she's like, I'll kill you. And then, unfortunately, her falling for the trick of one of them distracting her so the other one can stab her.
Exactly. And as far as we know, Leo doesn't have his powers right now and can't save her. And the sisters obviously don't have that ability either. So this could get pretty bad.
I also just want to point out this might be the only time in the series we ever hear Piper referred to as Mrs. Wyatt since she didn't actually change her last name.
Yeah. Oh no, I didn't even think about that. I forgot she never changed her last name.
Yep. Also, just
But
hand through the stomach was really gross. I didn't think we needed that tap.
yeah, I know. I don't really know what the point of that was, but
I think it was just to show like him being sadistic again.
yeah. So then in the attic, we see Phoebe is doing CPR on Piper, and Paige orbs in, and Phoebe asks where Leo is, and she says that he wasn't at Maria's. Where's the ambulance? Phoebe says that they're still not here, and Paige is like, is she? She's like, no, as long as we keep the blood flowing, she still has a chance. Put some pressure on her wound. Then we hear Leo run in, calling Piper's name, and Phoebe's like, where have you been? And he says, looking for them. Then Nathan and Rick appear behind him, and Rick says, here we are, and they throw him across the room. Then Paige runs at him and goes right through him, and Rick says, you can't hurt us, but we can hurt you. And he's about to hit Phoebe in the head when Leo yells, wait, you don't want them, you want me. You want to get even with me. And he says, you're right. Then Nathan hits him and says, I trusted you with my life, and you left me. And he continues hitting him, and Piper's ghost comes out of her body, and she sees herself on the floor and realizes what's happening. Rick and Nathan are about to stab Leo, but Piper tells her sisters to turn the book pages to the ghost spell, and she does the spell while she's out of her body, and the brothers vanquish. And she starts to move on, and she's like, a little help here, people. And Paige says, damn it, Leo, do something. You're a white lighter for a reason, because you did good things. And Phoebe says, think of all the lives you've saved, all the good you've done. And Paige says, all the lives you won't save if you give up now, including your wife. Then Leo gets up and runs over to Piper and starts doing CPR. He says, don't die this way because of me. And his hands glow and he starts to heal her. She goes back into her body and wakes up. And she's like, well, it's about time. That was close, really close. And then her and Leo hug.
So this is a really good scene. I love the fight here. I love all the characters. It's one of those scenes with many characters that the show does really, really well. I really love the way that obviously, like, we have Leo at the end coming back to himself when it's Piper's life that's at risk, and that's what brings him back. It's giving me kind of like reminiscence of season one when Piper had his powers and her love for him allowed her to access them and save him. Same thing here when Piper's life is in danger, his love for her brings his powers back and he can save her.
It was such a perfect, like, beautiful ending for the two of them. I definitely loved that so much.
I also just love the casual intimacy between them. Like, if this were Phoebe and Cole, this would be like a huge makeout moment, right? But with
Hmm.
Piper and Leo, they have such an established dynamic that, like, all we need is that hug to know that, like, the love between them is there. And I like that. Like, I like intimacy between characters that isn't just them making out all the time.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, with Phoebe and Cole, it is always like that. But with Piper and Leo, they don't need that. It's like a different level of connection that I feel like they have that just works so beautifully in situations like this for them to be so casually about it, you know?
Yeah. We also see Leo in this scene again sacrificing himself to protect Phoebe and Paige from Nathan and Rick before ultimately the vanquish. And then, like I was saying earlier, we got a lot of foreshadowing of the spell being used the same way that Prue was out of her body and vanquished Jackson Ward. Now we see Piper doing that with these two.
Exactly. Again, another nice kind of callback there.
So then we go back to the towers, and Cole is standing out on the balcony, and Phoebe comes in off the elevator, and he says, "Is everything all right?" She says, "Yes, it's better now. Let's see. Leo lost his powers, and then Piper died, and it got really dicey when she turned into a ghost, but everything worked out." And he says, "Glad it was nothing serious." And she laughs, and they hug, and he says, "Ready to go home?" She says, "No, can't we stay a little while longer?" He says, "Well, we could stay as long as you like. The place is ours." She's like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "The firm's offered it to me. All we have to do is say yes." She says, "Well, I guess now that Paige can orb me in if something comes up, and seeing as we just proved we could still save the day, yes." He's like, "Yes?" She's like, "Yeah." And then they kiss and hug, but while they're hugging, he kind of like looks off with this like weird blank stare.
So it's official. They're moving out of the manor and in together, and who knows what is going to happen from here.
I want to just say though, it's just such a suspicious thing again. Like the firm is just giving them this apartment. Like, why do they like Cole so fucking much at this firm, quote unquote?
I don't know how it's not suspicious to any of them. Like, I would have so much like trauma and issues from when Cole was a demon that, like, despite still trusting him, that feeling of like, well, wait a minute, where is all this coming from though? Like, you would think any normal person in the situation would feel that exact same way. Like, oh, they're
Yeah,
just offering you all of these things. Come on, be for real.
yeah. And like, I'm sort of like, is it plot's sake, or am I again just supposed to like connect it with the baby? But like, also, why is no one else questioning it? Is like,
Exactly.
what?
There's not one logical person in this situation here. It doesn't make any
Yes.
sense to me. So then we go to the final scene of the episode, and we are at the reunion that we were talking about in the beginning. And Piper and Leo start to walk in. He freezes up, and she tells him to come on and says that he belongs there. And Leo's like, I still don't think it's a good idea. And she says, your grandfather would want you to be here. And they smile at each other and then decide to walk in. And an old man in a wheelchair calls to him, then moves closer and says, dear God, I'm looking at a ghost. You're related to Leo Wyatt, aren't you? And Piper says, yes, this is his grandson, Leo Wyatt III. And the old man brings his sons over and says, I want you to meet the grandson of the man who made it possible for you to be born. His grandfather died saving my life 60 years ago. You wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that man. And then one shakes his head and says, it's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Wyatt. My dad's been telling me stories about your grandpa since I was a boy. I'd like you to meet my family. And then the old man calls over some other guys who Leo saved back in the war, and they all come over and shake his hand. Then a woman walks over to Piper and says, what's going on? Who is that? And Piper says, my hero. And more people keep going up to Leo. Just reading Piper saying that made me want to cry. Like,
There
that
are
was
literally
so,
tears in my eyes right now. Like I
like,
can't even see because
like that made me want, like, I almost teared up saying that. That was, oh my God. Dude, that's a different level of love and loyalty right there. The way Piper's just so proud of him and just so desperately wanted him to see that he was so cherished and did so much good, you know, like genuinely an amazing man. Like all this insecurity and self-doubt, he doesn't deserve any of that. And like to see him get all this respect and appreciation, oh, it must have meant the world to both of them, you know?
yeah, if I'm being honest, if it weren't for this scene, I would have considered this like a very okay episode. Like it
Hmm.
is this scene that does it for me. I also like I've always liked Piper and Leo, but in this rewatch, like I've become like a much bigger Piper and Leo shipper, and like so this scene really touched me. Like I said, like I teared up just like as you were reading it, but when I was watching it, I was like full on about to start bawling.
Yeah.
Like it's just such a beautiful moment for Leo and like to show the love that Piper truly does have for him and the way that she wanted this for him, especially after everything he's been through, all the guilt he's been feeling, to give him this moment of like, all these people here today wouldn't be here if you hadn't done what you did.
Yeah, he needed to know that. He needed to hear that. There's so much about this one scene in particular that makes this like such a strong wrap up. And I mean, do I think it's a little like much that the grandson is like, "Oh my God, like you're the guy who saved my grandpa that one time. Come meet my family." Like, I don't know. It just like I don't know that normal people would react like that. But all around still very beautiful, and I love the respect that everybody has for him here and kind of that wrap up that we get.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a little bit over the top, but I do like it for what it does for Leo's character. And it did make me feel like more connected to him than I have in any previous episodes. Like, again, Leo's just always kind of been like Piper's man, you know what I mean? But now, like, we're really seeing him where he comes from, why he is the person he is, how he became this white lighter. So I like this origin moment for him.
Me too. Getting the backstory and having a little more understanding and seeing Leo more as his own person here is pretty. I think it was a very strong move for the show for them to give us that, you know?
Yes. Final thoughts on the episode?
I always like really liked this episode mostly because of the Leo emotion in it and everything around that sense where we get to see the acting and it definitely makes me feel like it makes me feel so much more for him as a character. Aside from that, I wouldn't say that it's like one of the greatest episodes in a lot of other ways, but I still think that it was a very enjoyable watch despite all the little flaws in it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's a super enjoyable episode. I like getting Leo's backstory. I think in terms of like season long plot lines in this episode, one thing we're getting, I mean, Paige gaining a new power was cool. We got the fact that Phoebe and Cole are going to move out. We're getting some like hints that Phoebe might be pregnant here. So I guess we'll have to see the next couple of episodes or next episode or whatever the case is to find out if that's true. We have obviously seeing like even more of Piper and Leo's connection, how strong of a relationship they have. I thought that was really beautiful to include. And Phoebe, of course, continuing with her new job that we saw her get last episode.
Right, absolutely. Hints to season long plot lines, I'd say, but we don't get anything too major right now.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. Or you can send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. Either way, we appreciate you listening and hope you'll join us back next time for season 4, episode 18, Bite Me.